Hi, everybody, and welcome back to RHAP's coverage of Australian Survivor Redemption. My name is Mike Bloom, and yet again, I come in amazed, astounded, stupefied. I'm running out of adjectives to use, quite frankly, when I come back in to talk about one of these episodes where someone or someones have just done something absolutely wild that we certainly did not expect going in. And it's Jackson's turn to enter the ring this time, as we will talk about the boot of the man who rose to prominence very recently. We just saw him put on his own Dr. Evil voice, and I am joined, of course, by someone who I would never tell to zip it. It is Pooya.
I am pumped. Mike, I don't know what happened this year, but the middle episodes deliver, the first episode of the week delivers, the last episode of the week delivers. Like, dare I say we're eating quite nicely? Maybe, dare I say we're eating better than an IKEA meatball feast?
Not so much. Not to spoil the previous podcast, but there's a little
Wow.
low quality of IKEA meatballs.
You anti-IKEA, Mike? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm not anti-IKEA. No. Please, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, especially when that baby costs like $72 and is named some sort of long Swedish name. But let us not lengthen the point here, Pooya. I mean, I guess I want to first by getting your reaction to last night's Tribal Council, which was just absolutely fantastic. So much fun to watch this high-stakes operation in the moment. So many things had to go right for Brooke and Keeley to pull this off. Give me your reaction to everything that went down that time before we get into all the stuff that led up to this vote.
I mean, it was incredible. I think we were gonna see the two idol gambit immediately last episode. No, I thought there's a world where they can open this up a little bit, push some people around, because ultimately they do have a lot more people on that side, so maybe they can make the wiggle room happen. I will give them credit, though. They had their wits about them. They're like, nah, if we just keep on the numbers, we have a 4-3 split, there's not many angles, doesn't matter what happens, we should be fine. Although it did end up pushing them to get out Blanche, and then could have been Ben, but I would have loved to see what happened if the 3-3 try was between Ben and Blanche. What do they do then? That would have been intriguing to me.
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday with Chappelle, that I think because there's 8 people voting, the 3 returnee plus Boomerang Alliance, kaput, I guess they're now sort of referring to them at this point, because I think Simon is back in. We'll talk about the status of Simon with basically everybody in the game at this point. They would have 3 votes, but it's out of 8 total. So essentially you would have to have one person flip to force a rock draw. And in which case, like, most of kaput would be safe. And then you would have to have 2 of them flip. So Cameron and Laws would probably be those 2 people. And, back then, all the way 24 hours ago, when we were young, sweet summer children, we're like, yeah, there's no way they would flip and do this. For what it's worth, we got a tease about it this episode. Cameron, again, entertaining the notion, ultimately does not go through with it. And that speaks to, again, Ben's ability to be able to incentivize all these newbies, underdogs, quote unquote, even though they have the majority, to stick together to take out at least one of these returnees. But Pooya, who would have thought that the most dangerous call would be the one coming from inside the house? I am blown away at this move. There have been so many questionable things that have been done this season, and some of them have panned out, and a lot of them have not. I loved watching this. I have no earthly idea why Jackson did this. It's befitting for a man who calls himself Scott Green when I have to ask, Jackson, are you high? Why are you turning on your closest ally?
I could play a little devil's advocate. We'll talk about that a little bit. We're trying to look at both sides.
To assign some rationale here, so this is going to be our job on the podcast.
But I'm telling you, I thought going into once the vote was about to be revealed, I genuinely thought, okay, I know exactly what happened here. Cameron stuck the vote with them, and he's going to get a little credit. We'll see where that goes, where that takes him. Little did I expect, because especially I feel like we didn't see nearly enough interaction for it to make sense for Jackson to do it right then and there, because everything coming from Simon, he had already poo-pooed earlier. He had already told us that he's like a whimpering dog. I don't even care. I'm just going to tell him I'm voting. Brooke, what is he going to do? He has no choice. He's gonna have to vote with me. So the fact that he switched is incredible to me. And I think that talking to him about wrestling and talking to him, putting it in his terms, really made him be like, do I really not want to grab the brass ring? Do I not want to be top of the food chain? Do I not want to be champion? Right now, the champion, if this is a wrestling promotion, he's the John Cena. Ben is the John Cena, and I am someone with full of potential who's not being utilized enough. I'm Kofi Kingston.
You can see Ben in this case, and you can see him on the jury now starting tomorrow.
Incredible that Ben goes out. I feel like the fact that we know he was in the final 5 plans with Ben and like could assume that the two of them would do decently in the immunities if in this scenario Simon's already gone. So does this make the road muddy for him now, Mike? That's the question. Do the newbies get mad at him? Do they blame him? Do they look at him before they look at the returnees and Keeley?
You know whose fault this is? You know who I lay the blame at the feet of? Caleb. Because Jackson sat here 2 episodes ago and saw Caleb turn on maybe not his number 1 ally, but someone he had been with the entire game. And everyone applauded him for it. And he was able to assimilate back into the majority. And nobody's like, wow, Caleb's looking real threatening right now. I think we should take him out. I think Jackson wanted that moment in the sun. I think that as much as, and again, what astounds me is, the way people are perceiving Simon, like they're laughing behind his back and rolling his eyes, but it seems like he somehow made a salient enough argument to Jackson over the course of these couple days of, hey, look at what Caleb is doing and getting applauded for. Look at what Ben, to a certain extent, is getting applauded for. Why should you be deprived of that attention? The issue, like you said, is the timing is incredibly off here. Stop saying that you're at the edge of the game. It's the final 9. No, maybe it's because, like, I was trying to remember. I feel like Australian Survivor in particular, maybe it's because it goes on for so long that, like, maybe once it hits, like, the final 7, final 6, the game slows down a little bit. I'm thinking back to Brains versus Brawn 2 when, the graduates reformed and locked in and then just kind of ran gamut the rest of it. Even Australia versus the world, right? It was like Sari, Parvati, Luke, and Janine joining it together and sort of running roughshod over the competition. So maybe, listen, I do not peg Jackson as someone to know the meta that well to be like, I've got to use these opportunities to submit my majority because then things get locked in. But it is just unbelievable to me that he thinks that this was the time to make the move, especially because now it's not like he's saying, okay, now I'm in a tight force-up. Now he's like, great, and we're going to force a deadlock vote next time. That's the boat you jumped into. The most leak-prone boat there was possibly, when there was a nice big old Ben boat that you were tugging along for the vast majority of this game. Again, I'm not to like poo-poo the entertaining factor of the move. And
I love it as a fan, yeah.
Oh, it's so much fun. And again, like, it seemed like he legitimately was. I did think it might have been Ben, just because of the order they were reading the votes. The fact that, like David said, the next person voted out wouldn't have made sense if Ben didn't get 4 votes. But the fact that Jackson was pulling in Eliza here, or Hannah Shapiro, like taking a long time in the booth, I really had to pause and be like, you're not really considering this, right? You told Simon to his face, this is my show, and the person is Brooke, and you certainly proved it was your show, sir.
I panicked. I was like, wait, he drew a straight line. It's clearly going to be Ben. Wait, Brooke's name also has a B. Never mind, we're safe. Like, I really also had the scare there. Yeah, I think what it comes down to, Mike, is that, and I love that you bring up the Caleb move, because I do think 100% Caleb's influence is present here. I think Caleb doing that and getting that reaction is really the argument now that you have as Simon, as Brooke, as Keeley to play, right? Which is, what are you going to differentiate yourself with these people? And like, we all see Ben as the leader. So if you're at the end with Ben, that means like that's the tiebreaker going against you. And I think he clearly wanted, when Simon said, let me be your shield, let me help you. He was like, you can be my vote at the end. That's what he says to Simon. And Simon does use that card and says, do this and you have my vote at the end, locked in. I think
this is textbook Simon, though, that he has already also promised Caleb, if you pull this off, you have my vote at the end.
Yep.
Now, granted, Caleb did not go through with it, so I guess that promise was invalidated. Otherwise, like, imagine if Caleb and Jax are the final two, and Simon's like, oh, damn it. I made too many promises again. I have to break
I don't know who to go with. I think that for me, what differentiates this from the Caleb move and why the Caleb move was so celebrated and this maybe not so much is a couple of things. One, I think that you have now pissed off 4 people that are in a deadlock without you. So they're not going to be happy with you. And they're going to see it as we had it, and you made this you blew it. I think the other difference is that with Caleb, Mark goes out. Mark has obviously a lot, like he has a resume by existing as a returning player. So he gets that. I think also Mark was applauded as a big game player. Nothing against Ben. The problem here, Mike, is that from basically the night before, anytime Simon, Brooke, and Keeley now get to leave Tribal intact, it's seen as their work.
Yep.
When Cameron says at his confessional, if you are still here, you have done some wizardry. You're a witch. That's why you're still here. No one is going to give the credit to Jackson. And even if Jackson explains that at the end, I think too many of them are going to see this as, no. This was their move. This was the move of the 3 people that did not have the numbers, who somehow convinced his best ally to turn on him. It's going to be very hard for him to snatch credit out of their mouths, unless obviously all 3 leave and then he could lay a case out. But I think that it's a little bit tough because he's going to be looked at as more of the person who got manipulated, not so much as the person who made a move. And maybe that's my read on it, but that's how I would interpret it if I was there.
I mean, I could see it to a certain extent. It does help, and I think certainly validate the move in Jackson's mind that, like, Ben is incredibly amicable. What I will say about this season is, despite, somewhat of the acrimonious words that some people will throw at one another, like, everyone who's been voted out has been incredibly understanding and kind. Like,
so good.
Listen, totally get it. I know we spent every day on the beach together, and I told you some very personal things, and we promised we'd lock into the end, but you made the right move at the end of the day. Now, maybe that's also something they say to, like, make themselves feel better, right? Of like, I guess to quote Cameron, I got before I get got. I'm gone girl. But I think that I think that there's something that could be said about the fact that Ben is now going to the jury with that in mind. That if you're wondering, like, who will give Jackson the credit for that move, Ben himself would. I think the issue is, again, Jackson making a move that I think jeopardizes him getting to the end there in the first place. Like, I do think that, as you said, even just outside of the narrative of these 3 somehow surviving another tribal council here, there's also just the idea that they are a 3 block at this point, assuming that Simon is now back in kaput, and the numbers are growing thinner now. If they survive this next vote, they are 3 of 7. And yes, that is a minority, but if you try to factor in splitting the votes, which is how Jackson was able to come, for lack of a better term, over the top rope here and take out Ben, that is a lot of power to wield in this game. This is becoming not incredibly similar in terms of, like, actual events that are happening, but I feel like I'm seeing Survivor 49 all over again, Pooya, in that, like, this was a threesome, right? That was also done in at the final 11 and was down 3-7, essentially. And granted, there were some things that worked for them in terms of advantages, but they somehow clawed their way back from the bottom to become 3 of the final 4. I would not be entirely surprised if we get that outcome somehow. I would be greatly surprised by the amount of steps that it would take of essentially all these newbies stepping on rakes to allow them to get to that place.
Yeah, it's just a very, very tough situation because I do think that, first of all, there's like really only a couple of people that I think have, for me, not had a storyline that's locking them in or giving me an end game picture. And I think Jackson's not one of them. I can see an end game picture for him. To your point, though, it is a very tough tightrope to walk now. You have to, first of all, if we have to believe that this is going to be a 4-4 down the middle split, we would have to assume that that goes his way. We would then have to assume that somewhere down the line, Simon fails to get an immunity. They all vote him out. We would then have to assume that Brooke and Keeley get separated. We would have to assume that on the other end, like those four don't just have all the power and then make him fifth place. Like there is so many things he has to get through now to get there. Whereas I think with Ben there, ironically, only one person, but one person can make all the difference. I think with Ben there, he was in the status quo of that bigger group. I no longer, and that no longer is the thing. And when it looks like you've unclamped yourself from a group to now clamp yourself into the fourth position of a 4-person team, it's a little bit of a tough thing to look at and give credit for, at least till now. Because again, if he makes it to the end, I think there's a case for him to be made.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter for me of also, how do you market yourself as an ally to anybody now? Of like, don't worry, I know I was Ben's number one and I got rid of him, but I'm locked in with you. I swear, you could absolutely trust me. This is just such a big, I feel like, scarlet letter on Jackson here of, okay, because here's the other thing as well. Like, again, you could equate it to Mark and Faith. Okay, he also voted out his number one. But the thing is that Mark felt like he had proof of concept, right? That Faith came to him, told him to his face, I don't want to take you to the end. And he's like, okay, I'm going to, again, anticipate the move that's being made against me and make the move to be able to beat her out about that. And then you have Jackson, who, again, from our perspective, Ben was not necessarily coming up with plans of like, yes, and I'm going to cut Jackson to be able to let myself get further in the game. Ben was incredibly loyal to Jackson. He had Jackson in his corner. And so it just feels like this was something to do to add a resume point. I think that Brooke's comment all the way back about big move-itis has truly shown the many, many viral cases that has existed this season. And I would argue, unless, we find out a different perspective here, this may be the biggest case of big move-itis we've seen this entire season. Maybe since Kat, deciding like, I'm just going to blow up tribal council. To have Jackson go in and decide to eliminate his biggest ally in the game, someone who is willing to take him to the end, to work alongside, to serve as another set of eyes and ears for him, as well, importantly, just because he wants to take the credit for it at the final 9. The math ain't mathin', for lack of a better term.
Let me ask you a question, because this just popped into my head. Do you think, because we're talking about resume, we're talking about big moves, we're talking about notching stuff onto your titles for the end, right? And do you think we've gotten to a place on the season where if you were on the opposing team to the returnees, getting them out was a neutral move for all of you? Like, was there ever going to be a situation where any one person there could take credit, except for Ben, who kind of is like the ringleader, right? Maybe Ben gets credit. Everyone else, you're getting the same shares. So what if, hear me out, what if by moving and inserting yourself into the returnee group, now when you vote them out, it's like, oh, they thought they had him, but he fooled them. He went undercover. He went in with them, wolf in sheep's clothing, took him out. Then you can take the credit, and you get the Ben credit also. You get double credit.
That's the thing, though. What are we doing with credits here? There's no scoreboard.
I'm trying to figure it out.
Oh no, I agree. I really appreciate this. Like I am just pushing back against the general argument here. Like that's what this comes down to for me. Is there is not a big scoreboard. There's not a Glenn Ross chalkboard being like, all right, who's got a big move and mark it down. That's the beautiful thing about a Survivor jury, is that you can vote on any piece of criteria that you want to. It's why Sophie Clark, I think, so beautifully brought up the idea that the age of the resume, it's a little overreported in Survivor. It's more about the story than the resume. And so that's what makes this kind of weird, especially if he's ascribing to the logic of like, well, Caleb got one and I got to catch up to Caleb. There's no track record here necessarily. It's all about the narrative that takes to get there. Now, look, again, I am more than happy to eat crow on this podcast, as we will get to in our takes on Simon in this episode. And so Jackson may have now been able to find himself a way to immerse in the majority. Listen, if this 4 is a 4, he does have options. He could possibly go along with Simon, tie a vote, try to split up Brooke and Keeley, or he could easily jump in with Brooke and Keeley and take out Simon, and then he could theoretically pose to Brooke and Keeley what was proposed to him, which is, yeah, you two have made a lot of similar moves. Hey, remember when you two exchanged idols? That's how just inseparable you are. do you really want to take each other to the final two and just muddy the waters? Why not take me? I voted out my closest ally and sent him to the jury. Who do you think's voting for me at that point? But again, I don't know if I would say on the one hand, I don't know if Jackson's seeing that far ahead, but it seemed like Jackson was also maligning as well in this episode the idea that Ben was apparently very short-sighted. I think it does make sense from Ben's perspective because he is consistently receiving votes every episode. So I think it is much more about survival to him than for Jackson. Maybe another flag of this, Pooya, another rationale might have just been like when Ben goes up to Jackson and says, okay, let's split it 4-3. And Jackson's like, you're not bored by that? Like, it could be possible that somehow Jackson felt a little bit of like, first world problems, a little bit of majority privilege here, getting to be like, do we have to split the votes again? Can't we do something fun?
I think that rinse and repeating the same thing, and then, and like, mind you, the last time they did it, they didn't get the result they wanted. They end up splitting it on Blanche as a contingency, which works, but they never wanted Blanche to leave. If they had stood firm at Keeley, Keeley would have been long gone by now. So I do think that there is some validity to the idea that, hey, I don't want to keep doing the same old. I'm here to I want to jump off the top rope. Okay. I want to jump. It's like, sometimes when you're a kid watching wrestling and it's like, why are they not pinning them right now? Why are they taking their time? Because storytelling, because you are in it for the long haul. And he just doesn't want to do the clean pin. He's like, man, enough of that. I want to drop one from the top rope and see how that feels for a change. And I think that doing the safe 4-3 split multiple times, while tried and true, I think that in this scenario, he was like, no, but also I genuinely do think, Mike, that for him, you just brought up the whole, like, maybe he tells Keeley and Brooke, you've just been lockstep, so how are you going to differentiate yourself? I think the problem was when he compared himself to Ben, he's like, we're playing the same game, but he could tell everyone else, like, well, Ben's number one, you're number two. Like, you're like a little bit behind, but you're still behind, And I think that was not gelling with him. I don't think he loved that. I think also sitting there realizing that, hey, if Simon's saying all these things, Brooke's probably going to say all these things. If Brooke's saying all these things, Keeley's going to say all these things. If they're saying all these things, maybe that's what Mark is saying. Already now you're like 4 votes down. So I think that also can cause a panic.
Well, not to mention the fact that if the idea is to send Brooke to the jury, then it's like, is that what she thinks of me? And Brooke just said firsthand, she has direct experience in people going to the end, trying to claim they did the things they did, and it ended up falling short. Ironically enough, maybe she voted for someone in her first season who was claiming that, but that's neither here nor there. But maybe Jackson sort of took that lesson to heart of like, if we do vote Brooke out, Brooke is going to come to the jury with a bit of a negative perception of me in comparison to Ben. But it still goes back to my main point, which is why now with Ben? If you get rid of one of them, if you get rid of Brooke, not only are you separating her and Keeley, but it makes things a little more wiggly for you to be able to work things if you want to. I think he saw an opening was being offered to him, and he took it. I can understand that he wanted to be opportunistic. And I do also wonder if, again, it connects back to Jackson's ideology and his profession, right? We see in one of his packages that essentially his redemption is the fact that, like, he doesn't like people feeling like telling him that he needs to be doing things. This is a guy who was getting a psychology degree, dropped out of college to become a wrestler. That's why I think he was so belligerent towards Simon, both in confessional and out of confessional. Like, stop telling me to do this thing. I'll do it when I want to do it. But I also wonder if, he kind of lapped up the spotlight when that Harry moment happened with the Flint, when he was able to get one over on a 3-time player. He lapped it up when it seems like he architectured Asha's boot, put the Beauty and the Beast together to get one over on Lottie and Gang. Maybe he was just chasing that high. Like he had said, it had been a while since he was in the majority. It's been a while since he was able to sort of be able to celebrate something that he himself contributed to. It might, honestly, not to go full psychology, because I have even less of a degree than Jackson does, but maybe it just speaks to something as simple as that.
I think that's entirely possible. I think that, as humans, we do love a good bit of dopamine sometimes. We want something a little different. Eating the same meal every day can be tiresome. You want something, let me feel something different for a change. And maybe last night was basically that night was the night that straw broke the camel's back, where enough pushing and prodding had happened where he's like, you know what? Yeah, I don't want to eat this again for dinner. I want something new, something different, something exotic. I like I'm about to say I'm the prospect of eating my friend, which I don't think is what I'm going to say. I'm not going to end that thought, but I think there's validity to that for sure. I think that there's validity to that. I think also there is a world where you just start feeling like you are having it too easy. And if you're too comfortable in Survivor, is that a good thing? This comes up a lot of times. So I think he just kind of got a little jittery and got a little bit terrified at the idea of having it too easy. And 500,000 is a lot of money. Simon made sure to bring that number up multiple times to him.
Yep.
So yeah, you dangled the carrot and he bit it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Simon I even think even more than the 500,000, the 3-word phrase legacy making move, that may have had the most impact, right? Like $500,000 could certainly get you a good amount of ways in life, but legacies last forever. And I wonder if, again, Jax is not necessarily a dyed-in-the-wool fan of the game by my estimation. So it's not like he's like, and I want to be etched in the halls of Australian Survivor. But there is something that's very fun, especially coming from a natural entertainer, of being able to make this mark for yourself. Now we need to talk about Simon here because, listen, Chappelle and I were feeling a certain way about basically all the stuff he was doing in yesterday's episode. It was a little sloppy, to say the least, and we basically watched this episode being like, no one's going to be able to trust him. And look, maybe it is from a certain perspective, any port in a storm. But I said yesterday, listen, I could come back here 24 hours from now and Simon has, secured a 5-person majority that's going to steamroll towards the end of the game. Listen, credit where credit is due. I was, I was a little bit of a doubting Dennis, but I am a believer in this episode in Simon Me, because he was persistent, but he was able to make this happen.
He delivered. He definitely does deliver here. When he wrote down Brooke's name, I just thought, all right, there's no way. This is all falling apart. It's over. The kaput alliance is about to be kaput. Like, this is going to be heartbreaking. So not only him winning immunity again, and then reuniting with the kaputs, becoming the 3 returnees again, and then being able to recruit not just anybody, Mike, the target's #1 ally. Kind of nutty. Kind of a great way to celebrate 100 days. Let me just tell you.
Yeah. I mean, he hit the century mark and now he woke up and became basically another person, that he was able to pull off a move that, again, on paper should never occur, to the point where Jackson is literally laughing in confessional, being like, why would I do that, dude? I am never even going to consider this idea. And again, I'll be so intrigued to get into Jackson's head to talk about what exactly was this move. Because considering, again, we go to tribal council and Simon says, this is show business, baby. And Jackson says, yeah, it is. And this is my show. And I'm saying, Brooke, what changed between then and now? It could be that Jackson wanted to leave him in the dark for fear of, like, Simon possibly reporting back to Ben, like, okay, Jackson's going to vote you out. And then trying to sow dissent in the ranks there. He really just wanted to try to keep everyone in the dark. But I also wonder, and I would say maybe this is the most salient argument that Simon made, especially if we are trying to go along with this theory that, again, Jackson wants specifically this point attached to his resume, the tick in his column, whatever you want to ascribe to it. Simon tells him basically, if you don't make this move tonight, Cameron and Laws might tomorrow. He's essentially saying the ship's bound to leave anytime right now. You could wait on the dock and see that maybe the ship will wait a little bit longer, but there's only so many, people in steerage that we can put on at any point in time. And there's a couple people that might be able to hop on board again. I do wonder if something that put him over the edge was suggesting to him a direct scenario that could come up the very next vote if this didn't happen. And it wasn't pulled out of thin air, because also, if they felt like the Jackson well had run dry, they spent the better part of the afternoon as a group trying to get Cameron on their side.
I think that is a very big point for me. Is that I think that if you're, and again, trying to work through in the mind of Jackson, I think working through the idea that I'm keen on wanting to differentiate myself, but I can also just holster this and do it tomorrow. But then tomorrow, if 2 other people from my group also jump on it, now it's not a special. Now I'm not the one. I'm not the only. I'm not the solo artist. I'm in an ensemble cast. And is that better for my prospects in the future? I don't know about that. So, I mean, we can talk about this till the sun comes up. I think ultimately for me, if I was in his shoes, a little too risky for me. I don't think I'm doing this early. There is no guarantee you get to final 2 from here, especially with losing your closest ally. But at the same time, I can also understand if you're going to treat it like a double-edged sword and look at it as, well, if I don't make a move at all, what point is me getting to final 2 at all? So I can see it both ways, Mike. I can. But I'm perplexed at the fact that this wasn't a move that was thought about all day long. It felt like it was last season. Nah, yeah, I'll just do it.
That's the thing, is that unless he is sort of selling us a bill of goods, that he had decided this the entire time Ozymandias style and was just selling it to us as like, what? You think I would really do this? No, me and Ben are locked in. It really does seem like, despite Simon's persistence and despite Jackson being annoyed by it, the story we're being told is that because Simon did step in this one last time at Tribal Council, which is just, can I also say, I have watched many seasons of Survivor. This has to be the season that has collectively had the most quote unquote live tribal councils I have ever seen in my life. If you count like the cat vote, if you count the Dawn vote, if you count the Redemption Beach vote, if you count obviously the vote against Rich, if you count last tribal council with Blanche, and then you count this one, like that is more than a quarter of us general season has been made up of these live tribal councils. And again, good on Simon for just taking over in that moment, right? Going to Jackson. And again, I didn't think it would work because I would argue, Pooya, of all the newbies who have been crapping on Simon the most, Jackson might be number 1 in the clubhouse. And maybe that's because he likes to cut a good promo. He likes to sort of like, kick people when they are down. But Jackson has said multiple times, both to us and to Simon's face, like, I don't trust you. Why? You're not voting with us. And so again, where I'm going to give credit where credit is due to Simon is that, like, I don't think him flipping back to kaput eradicates him deciding to make this move. Maybe he feels like if he didn't vote for Brooke last time, he wouldn't be able to get Jackson on board because Jackson would feel like there's just not a working relationship between the two. And maybe for Brooke and Keeley, it was any port in a storm. And especially with Simon being safe, it's like, well, shit, if you can't beat him, join him. But Simon was able to make something work in spite of the fact that, as you mentioned, me, you, Chappelle, I'm maybe a lot of people out there felt that like, oh, he had screwed everyone over at the beginning point of this episode.
Yeah. First of all, the live tribals of it all. I agree. There's been a lot more than I can remember. I think it's just become normal in this season too. Like, I've never batted an eye, but also credit to them, I've not been exhausted of it. I remember once upon a time, Mike, we were in a position where we would get so many live tribals that people were sick of them. People were mad.
Yeah.
The discourse online was like, enough. Like, what are we doing? This is stupid. This is not a story I was played. They've made it so normal. I've not questioned it once.
Yeah, I mean, well, not to mention the fact that I think also back in those days, it was kind of like whispering for the sake of whispering, right? Like, I think back to, if I'm remembering this correctly, the first tribal council of Survivor Ghost Island, where like Stephanie Gonzalez was going to go no matter what. And so like she was trying to stir shit up at the last minute to like try to flip things. Like, I don't think people were like, and now Gonzalez, you got to go. So there's like live tribal councils and there's like, live to tape tribal councils, right? Like, oh, you think it's live, but actually it's not.
Yeah. I still can't believe we're in the middle of final. Obviously, there's still, like you said, still only final 8. There's still plenty more to go. This doesn't rival Titans v Rebels for me.
No, I mean, that's
still going to be precious,
impossible.
But my God, are they putting a shift in? Like, it's been so entertaining. It's been so good top to bottom. Really only a couple of dud episodes. And even then, it's only because the standard has been very high this season that they would be called duds.
Yeah. So I want to get your thoughts on Simon in this episode. So do you think he put in enough work here across the board to be able to try to get his way through a vote if he doesn't win a challenge in the near future?
Okay. It's tough. I think it's very tough when you put yourself in a position where you're a back-to-back-to-back like immunity winner. When you're in a position where only one other person has really been able to like usurp you. For me, I think no matter what you do, you should be worried. Low key, Mike, if you did all this and you had immunity, that's worse. That's terrifying to me. Why should I keep you? Hell, is there a world where me as Jackson, Brooke, and Keeley should also consider you leaving to even the odds for ourselves individually a little bit more? I think it's tough, but I will give him credit where credit is due. I do think he is in a position, Mike, where in the event that there is no immunity one next round for him, let's say, it's a deadlock. It's a deadlock. And if those four decide we're gonna vote Simon because you three need to realize you can't win immunities with him here, and they go to a deadlock, Mike, who's safe at that point?
That would be Simon. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like what he did. I like that he pushed and he got something out of it, because I do think that the alternative here would have been Brooke leaves. It's just him and Keeley. He thinks he has connections on the other side he can work on. But the reality is, the minute he lost immunity, they were going to kick him out. They're not going to risk it. So if you're in a winner go home situation, making some extra connections and making some flips happen is not a bad place to be. Enhance the resume while you are going for immunity records also.
Yeah, I think Simon's MO at this point has to be just scatter as many people as possible. Use your time while you bask in safety to try to destabilize things as much as possible so that it does not become an easy open and shut vote. Because I will say, yet again, for a second episode in a row, I think we were led to believe that had he lost immunity, it was going to be straight out, basically. Like, Brooke and Keeley were not very happy with Simon. They were, again, insulting him behind his back to his face. It was not looking good for old Simo. They called him a traitor, basically. But sorry, RIP Cat there, traitor represented. But he is faithful, for lack of a better term, to these two people right now. I think that certainly helped. Is that, okay, listen, as much Ben was literally looking at me across tribal council and saying vote Brooke, and he leaned over to Brooke and said, they're voting for you. I think that to me shows that, like, maybe he feels he made a mistake in voting for Brooke last time. That I think he realized kind of what we all did, which is like, okay, it's good that you're showing your loyalty to these guys, but like, it holds no value considering the previous two times you had broken said loyalty. And I think he sort of realized it to come back home, for lack of a better term, and be with the people who, yes, he definitely has ticked off at this point. But I think also one of the reasons why, he brings up to when they're talking with Keeley and Brooke about, like, okay, is it plan B or is it plan C? Is it Cameron or is it Ben? I mean, taking Ben out here is a pretty big Jenga piece. Granted, again, we don't know exactly what the dynamics are on this slowly shrinking other side. We know Cameron and Laws are together. That's basically it at this point. We don't know where Caleb or Sally stands. And maybe that's something that Simon is banking on here. That, yes, maybe, Jackson might not necessarily be with this group for the long term, but if they are not necessarily a unified block, that's something he could take advantage of. And I will counter a point you made before that if Simon, if he gets 4 votes, he may be safe. But he did make a promise, Pooya, that if anyone flipped, he would draw 2 rocks out of the bag. So he has to keep that.
I did love that. I did forget about that little gambit that he's put out there. Wild if anyone actually thinks he could pull 2. I hope that's one of the most like, silly Simon. We're not falling for this. But I have to admire somebody who is winning immunities playing the game this aggressively. Because I think what irks me the most about immunity beasts is that if they win immunity, they're like, I don't care. I'm just going to go back and win it tomorrow. I think Simon's actually playing the game, which I do appreciate. And he's trying stuff. And I don't think that. Do you think? Okay, so they clearly went out of their way to show us this, hey, pulling 2 out of the bag thing. Do you think we'll get a payoff to that? Do you think we're going to be deadlocked next episode? That's what I'm asking you, Mike Bloom.
Oh, that's a good question. It's interesting because they keep chanting rocks, rocks, rocks. Like, again, it is objectively wild that at the final 8, they're like, yep, we're going to war officially. Again, kudos to Ben for somehow being able to keep these other 4 people in line. They're like, yep, we're absolutely going to deadlock it now. I don't know if I completely trust Jackson to not flip back in that moment. Like, I could see a world where he decides to do that. I could see a world where, like, is Caleb going to go to rocks for these people? Like, again, he's a bit of a wild card in so many ways. So I don't know if the other four quote unquote underdogs, newbies, feel incentivized enough to have to force the deadlock, right? Like, that's where rocks,
Mhm.
in theory, should come from. Is if you feel like there are no other options, this is our group. But I would not be surprised in the least. In fact, of all seasons in Australian Survivor history, we have had rocks teased so many times. Brooke herself was in part undone because Sharn promised rocks and then relented. If there
Yeah.
was one season, one cast that was buck wild enough to say, yeah, we're just going to leave it up to a random draw, it
Mhm.
honestly would be this cast.
In before, Jackson flips back to his original group, and Caleb flips to the returnees, and we go to rocks because they both try to make a move, because it really feels like the storyline of the both trying to one up each other is hilarious, and I would love to see that. Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. This has been a cast that is very, I was about to say cutthroat, unpredictable,
Yes.
very unpredictable. So I couldn't sit here and tell you with certainty that we're going to get a result, because who knows? Did I think that we were going to get Ben out this episode? I was not going to count out the returnees by any means, but I also did not anticipate that Jackson will be the one to flip on him.
That's the
So
thing, is like, I think certainly with the edit, again, Australian Survivor isn't subtle with Pride coming before a fall. When you have Ben being like, I don't anticipate any big waves being made except for the wave I'm going to do towards Brooke as she's walking down that tribal council path. So, like, they certainly love to set that up. But again, and let's talk about this next, I think the big piece that was being forecasted for us more than Jackson was Cameron. And you talk about not really knowing a lot of what people's end game plans are. We got a little bit of a glimpse into what's going on in the mind of one Cameron, as he is, again, very much ascribing to this idea of get someone before you get got. And I think, again, what makes this Jackson move even wilder is that Jackson, would stand no chance of Ben turning on him and wanting to take him out unless Jackson was doing something completely different from Ben. Cameron is trying to anticipate this happening. He feels like he's not really liking the way Ben's behaving. Apparently, he's changed to this completely new guy. It's not only represented in confessionals, it might be represented on the beach as well. And he is fearful that eventually they'll just be expendable to him. Yeah, these are his soldiers right now, but that means he's more than happy to, turn on his own if it meant winning the war ultimately. Do you think Cameron should have been the one to flip here instead of Jackson?
I think for me, I would lean Cameron, yes, because I think that we're talking passengers. I feel bad for Cameron. I think he's kind of been the passenger some of the most. And he's lost some of his closest allies on the way here, but even in those groups, I felt like he was secondary. It's not since like the early game have I looked at Cameron and thought he's been the controller of his own narrative. So him jumping, I wouldn't have hated here, because I do think that Ben and Jackson are still big threats on that side. I think they would still need his number, so they would still court him. The only way it goes sideways is if then they're like, you know what, throw everything to the wolves. Let's just dump it on Cameron. Hope he leaves, and then we'll have a 4-3 on the returnees anyway. Then we go to then we work on it. Maybe that's what they do. But I feel like I didn't like his landing spot as much as I liked the combination of Ben and Jackson.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I think there certainly were reasons why Cameron would flip here. Hell, I thought the thing that would be the primary motivation is when he talks with Keeley and he's like, "Hey, what's the plan tonight?" And she says, "You, buddy." Like, we'll talk about this as we memorialize Ben. I think obviously the move for him to try to get the returnees to throw votes onto Cameron was out of self-preservation. He did not want to be in danger of going home yet again. But that is information that could so easily come back to Cameron that says you are expendable in bold-face type of like, I am setting you up to get blanched. You see Blanche over there? You want to get as beautiful as her on the jury. You can't. It's impossible. She's gorgeous, but I'm sending you over there to try anyway. Like, that is such a clear sign as to where you stand in that alliance preemptively. I think another thing that Cameron would have as an out as well, which again, I don't know if Jackson necessarily has, is like, if you do flip over here, theoretically, you don't need to be a 4. If you are in as locked in with laws as you say, you could become a 5. Yeah, maybe you leave laws out of this vote if you make the flip last minute,
Mm-hmm.
but like you could easily say like, come on, let's work with them. Now the issue here is that I wouldn't even call it a lateral move because the issue would be that you are 2 out of an alliance of 3 other people that have pre-existing relationships and have voted together as a block. Now, again, Simon is sort of this X factor. Maybe Brooke and Keeley don't necessarily want to work with him long term. Hell, Brooke was trying to use her witch magic to curse Simon in the challenge to try to get him to drop the entire time. So they might not necessarily think that they want to take him to the final 3, and they could take advantage of that. I don't hate him not doing something in this moment because, again, I still think there is an opportunity with 2 people on the returnees. You don't
Yeah.
necessarily need 3 to make the moves that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think, unfortunately, the thing about Cameron as well that they easily clock is the fact that, listen, the man is great at reading Tribal Council. He's also very readable at Tribal Council. He wore Sally's freaking sweatshirt last time, which flagged that he was not going to vote against the Alliance anytime soon. And he was just kind of giving these wishy-washy answers that Brooks immediately like, yep, nope, Cameron's not flipping. Simon, do your work on Jackson.
Yeah, I think that he kind of fumbled it and closed the door on himself a little bit there. I think that when all things are said and done, they were looking for any person to get their foot through the door, and Jackson ends up being the one they pick. I think at this point, even if Cameron comes back next week and he's like, I want to jump over because I want to avoid rocks, let's say. Even then, at this point, I think the ship has sailed. I think for him, for Cameron, I think he needs to hold steady with the 4 he has. I think that's the best road for him to the end. And I think winning an immunity might not be a bad shot either. But the exit, we've missed the exit. There is no longer an exit for you into that roadway, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, let's talk about someone who did make their exit off this redemption roadway here. Let's talk about Ben. Of course, I get the chance to talk with Ben in just a few days' time, and I'm so excited to get just his general perspective on what his journey was, because this really was, Pooya, like a tale of 2 completely different people. And if I were to map this journey for Ben, it might be as simple as like in the beginning, he probably didn't know a lot about the game. You know, he was working with someone like Johnson who had this previous reality TV experience. Johnson eventually left. And as Ben espoused towards the latter portion of his game, like then he eventually learned he worked closely with Brooke. And if you do notice, like when Ben is in Beauty and the Beast, we get a bit more of him. And so I wonder if in real time, him learning the game and especially him being part of that majority alliance and being part of these blindsides, like gave him that first sip of alcohol, you know? And then he got incredibly drunk with power, just making these absolutely ridiculous pop culture laden confessionals and conversations. Again, it just seemed like an absolute out of nowhere shift. And I'm trying to figure out if it was realistic or if this was just like, yeah, we were hiding Ben for a while and now he's popping out and being a big character. But regardless, especially given his latter surge in personality, it's sad to see him go at this point.
I agree. I would have not, if you had asked me like after episode 4 or 5, how do I feel about Ben? I was like, I could take him or leave him, honestly.
He's a challenge beast.
Inoffensive, but yeah, not doing it for me. At this point, Mike, I'll be as bold as to say, I think, especially on the men's side, I think Ben is your top ballot returnee option.
Interesting. Even more than someone like Jackson?
I could see. I mean, Jackson has been fun. Caleb's been a big personality. But Ben, you know who Ben reminds me of a little bit? And it's probably the athletic background to then playing the game aggressively. You know, his brother was on this season.
Matt Roberts Rogers himself.
That one, exactly. I could see it. I could see him having a returning redemption arc. Because if he truly did learn the game on the fly, we know this from experience. Those are some of the best players to watch any show on. Big Brother, Survivor, doesn't matter. When you're new and we can tell you're a bit of fish out of the water, and then you take to the game like you've lived there your whole life, it's phenomenal to watch. And I did love seeing this from Ben. I do think that the storyline for him being he rises from the ashes, he builds something. He's now suddenly the king of the newbies. He's the messiah for the newbies, if you will. only to get stabbed in the back by his closest ally is such a fun story.
So close to Easter too, Pooya. It's on the nose.
Incredible. Yeah, couldn't script this.
Does that mean he's going to come back in 3 days? That's the ultimate redemption.
There, to my knowledge, we shut down Redemption Island early. I don't think we're doing that at Redemption Beach.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I will give kudos to Ben here that despite him being on the chopping block so many times, like he pulls everyone aside at the beginning of this episode and is like, thank you for keeping me in the game. Again, the fact that him and Jackson were able to whip the votes in that moment, that yes, they had a fundamental misread of what Brooke and Keeley were doing, and they were able to pull off this absolutely incredible move and tribal council moment. But like, he was able to save himself multiple times. And again, I don't think that him trying to throw a cherry bomb in the middle of the returnees here and suggesting Cameron like is necessarily the thing that engineers his ouster. Maybe again, if I'm trying to spin straw into gold here, maybe it's like when he goes back to Jackson, he's like, you won't believe what I did. I remember the beautiful five, that thing. I made it a thing. And I said we were going to vote Cameron. And maybe Jackson's like, huh, you're doing a lot of plans with your name behind it. But I think that Ben was a very fun alpha male here. Like you said, it's very interesting to watch these people learn the game and then be able to get like a glimpse of power and not only hold on to it, but magnify it immensely. And again, he had everyone in line. It was only due to the, I would say somewhat at least illogical actions of his closest ally that he ends up going here. But maybe him trying to shift the votes onto Cameron was like a key indicator of the fact that he was playing a little too cute and a little too visibly. I don't think even if Ben stays in this episode, he is long for the game. He is just way too big of a target. He'll keep getting votes every single tribal council. And as we saw this time, it only takes like one or two people to flip at that stage and write down Ben and he's gone all of a sudden. But if he had to go down, what an absolutely incredibly chaotic way to do so.
It was fun. The exit was fun. I think it's a memorable exit. I do agree with you that there is, obviously we recognize that Ben had all the power on that side, but I think ultimately everyone noticing that is not a good thing. And I could have seen him getting cannibalized the minute they get to 5, where they're like, we are not going to let these two have it. We're going to switch on. We're going to turn on them. So I don't think he could have, I didn't see him in a winning position. That being said, I do think that he does leave the season with a bit of a win because I feel like he is a compelling character. I feel like his rise to then fall is a very fun arc to watch. Him getting betrayed by Jackson is great. And also the thing I loved most about this is the fact that he's still rooting for Jackson to win.
Yeah. Like he basically immediately snapped into game respects game, which again, I cannot imagine whatsoever. If you're voted out of Survivor, and especially if you are blindsided by your number one ally, there is a laundry list of emotions that are flowing through your head. I do not think you jump to acceptance immediately in the 5 stages of grief in the way that some of these people like Lottie, like Asha, like Faith, like Ben have been doing. But maybe, he'll have more time at Ponderosa to chew on things a little bit, both in food and in ideas as well. I also want to give a shout out to Jackson because he has also been the king of very fun voting confessionals these past 2 episodes. Of course, the ironic one happening last episode when he says voting for Blanche, I'm like 90% certain you're not going home tonight, so I'm not even going to waste my line on this vote. And then this episode where he is just speechless, Pooya. That shows how emotionally fraught Jackson was. The wrestler could not say a witty line as he voted out his closest ally. That's how torn up he was about it.
Yeah, he was not living for this decision. Absolutely, ultimately makes a hard decision. He doesn't know where his game goes. We don't know where his game goes from here. But one thing is for sure, his game has forever been changed. The trajectory is now completely different to what it was the night before.
All right, well, let's get into who is behind that change of trajectory in a vote that's all about assigning credit. Let's figure out who we assign credit to with the Chizzy. Take it away, Jacob Weinstein and MC Kala.
2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's getting kind of Chizzy. 3, 2, 1.
All right, this is an interesting one, Pooya, because the biggest move made by someone in this episode is the one that we have very mixed emotions towards. So how does that reflect in your ratings today?
Well, Mike, let's open the ceremonies with our 3-pointer.
Okay.
Okay. The also, by the way, when last week we talked about the 96 Bulls of it all, did he or did he not refer to the Pippin to my Rodman?
Yep.
So we're just going to acknowledge that none of us see each other as Michael Jordan. We just decided to skip Michael.
They
not
all
him.
said that Mark was the Michael, I suppose.
Yeah.
We assigned it as well. And also, thanks to the people who have been telling both Pooya and I specifically about how Australians were really into the 96 Bulls, partially because of Luke Longley. So, yeah, who would have thought they had a very vested interest in basketball 30 years ago?
Okay, so back to the 3-point line, Mike.
There we go.
I'm about to drop a wet jumper. Okay. I'm leaning on giving 3 points. Not leaning, I'm all in. I'm giving 3 points to your last remaining player in the draft. I'm giving it to Mr. Simon himself.
You had to bring that up, didn't you?
I mean, listen, all I know is you lost everybody, and now you and Shannon have the same amount of players left.
Yeah,
So...
I was going to say, I have had a very Simon-like arc where I lost everyone early on, and it's just been me, like, quote-unquote, winning out, basically. Though, again, it's been very, very tricky for him, considering that basically all of the last 3 episodes, he was going to be the prime target at some point.
Yeah, it was going to be a tough road. Simon wins immunity again. Okay, so the threat level is already rising. Then I think he is able to patch up the things that happen with Brooke and Keeley when he does not vote with them. He cowers out. They see it as a coward move. He cowers out and lets Blanche leave when they could have had Ben earlier. He patches those things up. He then builds a bridge, tries to build a bridge with Cameron. That doesn't quite go many places. Builds a bridge with Jackson. And I think that even though Jackson is telling us that this is not working, it basically comes off like he's offending Jackson by how much he's doing it. Guess what? It worked. He got what he wanted. Jackson votes out his closest ally. And now going into next week, when it should have been, okay, the numbers are dictating we are toast, it's over. There's hope. There is hope to be had here. And it's thanks to a lot of the legwork he's put in. And he still could just win immunity. Like, that's still an option for him. So again, someone who had safety, playing very hard, bringing a number in. I'm giving him 3. And I'm not going to regret it either.
Neither am I, because I'm doing the exact same, which I'm so happy about because, again, I did not like essentially anything he did in the previous episode. And that doesn't change my feelings about it because this is also very Australian Survivor, and especially Australian Survivor redemption coded of like, you could have a really weird, questionable episode, but then you find the right people, the right circumstances happen, and you turn it around. And again, we still don't know. We probably won't know for a while what was the thing and who said what to get Jackson to be able to do this. But right now, I have to go with what's in front of us. And what's in front of us was Simon making this argument over and over again, being able to work on this relationship that clearly has been around since Braun 1.0, that Brooke and Keeley certainly do not have with Jackson. You know, essentially, Simon has been sent out by Brooke and Keeley to be the Jackson envoy at this point, and Simon was able to do his part. He was able to land Jackson here. Whatever argument was made, whenever the argument was made, he did this. He now seemingly has Jackson on his side, at least for a vote. He still has Brooke and Keeley, who at least in this moment want to work with him. He has now hopefully shown their loyalty again. And listen, I know that we are very much, I think, a network in general codified to not necessarily luxuriate a lot of praise onto people who win challenges. But I also like to give a little bit of the extra mile if he was clearly in a lot of danger and he won a very clutch immunity challenge to guarantee he makes it one round further. So it truly shows that when Simon locked in on the century mark, he may be locked in towards the end of this game. I still don't know how people see him. That's another thing corollary to all this. Is like, I mean, literally, Ben and Jackson's making a joke of like, oh, Simon's going to make a speech after he won. And like, Simon essentially gave the locker room speech of like, yep, you got to believe in yourselves. And everyone was basically laughing about it. I don't know how a jury votes for that guy to win at this point, considering that they are low-key mocking him.
Yeah, Simon is a big question mark for me. I feel like I've seen and registered how people feel about Keeley. I've seen and registered how they feel about Brooke. Um, Simon, I don't know. So many people this season have told me that Simon has stabbed them in the back. Simon's word means nothing. Anything Simon says is dumb. And yet here he is collecting 6 points from us.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a different side to him. We're seeing something. Can he turn that narrative around? Is he able to? I think he is. I think it's possible. It just comes down to how the rest of the game goes, I guess. And is he able to clean up that mess?
Yes. All right. So hopefully not a messy 2 points that you are ascribing here, but let me not put words in your mouth. Who are your two?
Listen, we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what Jackson did and why, right? I think ultimately in my heart of hearts, I can't give Jackson a point, 2 points here. That's not going to happen. Then we move into our next game, which is, are we allowed to give points to someone who's already gotten points?
You can, yeah.
Oh, what?
Oh,
wow,
no,
well,
no. I mean, you're going to give Simon 5 points? No, I think you meant someone who's already gone.
No. Yeah. No. I'm not going to do it. Although, I would be willing to honorary give a point to Ben, but I'm not going to do that. I would like to give a point to Mike. Can you go first? Because
Yeah.
you might have to paint my mind a little bit.
Yeah, I've got a 2 locked in here because,
Okay.
spoiler alert, I have Jackson for the 1. I wanted to give him credit for what he was able to do. It's sort of like when you and I were here last week and I gave a point to Mark of like, listen, you were able to make this move. I have a lot of questions about it. Perhaps even more. Rich himself even had questions about it in our interview when he made a shout out to you. But I'm going to give 2 points to Brooke here because Brooke, she doesn't do a lot in this episode, certainly not compared to last episode where she, ironically enough, gets the same amount of points here. But she, yet again, is able to avoid danger. She is building a narrative for herself, as you mentioned, where like, I know there's a big narrative of Ben being like, why is everyone voting for me? Brooke is getting a similar amount, if not even more heat on her, but has been surviving every single time. She is one of the people to clock immediately that Cameron is not one to be trusted and tells Simon to work on Jackson, which again could have been the thing that led him ultimately to have her survive at the end of the day. She still has Keeley as well. She has Simon back in the fold and on her side. So obviously she did much less compared to this episode. But I feel like what Brooke was able to escape from and how she was positioned is enough to get her the 2 for me.
That's a compelling argument. I think my favorite part of that is the fact that Brooke gets done practically, not like obviously she didn't get voted out, but she was safe. She got done dirty by Simon a little bit and is able to put that aside to be like, all right, we have to keep moving on together. Let's just move on. Proceeds to really work on the relationship with him, tell him what to, hey, let's focus on this person now. I do like that. I think she has an unbreakable bond with Keeley. That's very clear to me. And I think ultimately she is the second biggest immunity threat right now behind Simon, and they just can't get rid of her. And I do think that the reason I might give her the 2 points here, but it might be for a completely different reason. And that reason is we see this happen on Survivor quite a bit. When someone's the target 3 rounds in a row, 4 rounds in a row, at some point people stop putting votes on that person and move to the next target because it just isn't working. Is this insanity? Are we trying it over and over again? We're not getting results. I'm going to go ahead and round out my 6 points total by doing 2 and 1 back to back. I'm going to give my 1 to Keeley.
Okay, but Kaput is getting all the points from you this episode.
Absolutely are. Yeah, I think that while I understand giving the 1 to Jackson, and I heavily considered it myself, I think for me, this 3 being intact 2 tribals in a row is incredible. And while I do think the magic will and could end, if we're genuinely headed to next episode with a 4-4 deadlock, that is equally impressive to me. And a big part of that comes down to the fact that they are playing unafraid. They are playing balls to the wall. They are not letting death become them, and they are hustling to make sure that they still have a story to tell. So if you were 3 people on the outs and now you are in a 4-4 tie, let me give you your 10s. Let me give you your points here.
I will also say, I think Brooke and Keeley in particular are a very fun pair on the bottom,
Oh
as
yeah.
they're just like bemoaning. I mean, to speak to again the frankness that these people have this season, what an incredible scene when Cameron and Keeley are talking, and Cameron's like, "I'll vote Ben," and Keeley laughs in his face, then calls Brooke over, says, "Cameron's in on the Ben plan," and then Brooke proceeds to laugh in his face. Like, these people do not have F's to give. They understand where the pecking order is. And so again, it is absolutely incredible that they are surviving. 9 times out of 10,
Mhm.
we see this type of thing happen and they just get easily picked off one right after the other. But these almost supernatural circumstances keep happening every single time to have them stay. Yeah, I mean, so again, we'll see what happens with Jackson. You know, I might lament after the fact that I didn't give him the 2 instead of the 1, but right now I just have such an odd gut feeling. Maybe it's all those IKEA meatballs, but just about the move that he made, if it really was just for show and that
Mhm.
it did make his path considerably harder here. But the fact of the matter is, this was the move to talk about in this episode. And it
Yes.
sets things up for a considerably more entertaining episode 18 than maybe we were in store for if Brooke left.
Yeah, listen, hell, I think ultimately we both are feeling iffy about the move. For all I know, come exit interview, Jackson's there, calls me Pooja, tells me I'm wrong. So who knows? We'll see. We'll see how it plays out.
All right. Well, Pooya, we shall be seeing you on all the many podcasts you're going to be doing over the next 7 days before we reconvene. Anything particular you want to plug to the listeners out there?
Two things. 90 Day Fiance, we're officially caught up. Shout out to Annabelle, who really came in the clutch to make sure that we get across the line there. So we've completed that. And myself and Liana had a very fun exercise of our own over on the Pooya and Liana Lounge this week, where we cast Survivor 50, not counting anybody who's already on the cast and only
Ooh.
looking at people who haven't played more than once.
Oh, the B
So-
team, basically, like the second All-Star team.
Yeah, and the one last thing we added was we looked at anyone who wouldn't have had an opportunity for a returnee season. So basically anyone from Game Changers after.
Oh,
For the most
interesting.
part. Yeah.
Okay, I love that experiment. All right, so if people are looking for a little bit of alternative programming to Survivor 50, you could check that out, or you could keep on checking out what we've got with Australian Survivor Redemption
Yes.
because they're teasing rocks. Listen, we've been here before. It's been teased before. It has not gone through. I am not counting my rocks before they hatch until we actually see people reach into that bag and Simon reaches in for 2. So we shall see what is going to go down over the course of a Wednesday night. Again, as a reminder, we'll not be on tomorrow night. We'll be on Wednesday night, where I'll be joined by another guest to break down what should be an exciting end to yet another exciting week of Australian Survivor. What a back-to-back here. Again, we get this incredibly fun, flashy move from Keeley and Brooke that was somehow able to be that 1,000,001 shot in the Death Star that blows things up. And then Jackson proceeds to blow up his own Death Star, essentially. He proceeds to, he's Darth Vader, actually, with the Emperor in the pit in Return of the Jedi. So we'll see what Star Wars allegory will correspond with Wednesday's episode in due time. Thank you all, as always, so much for listening. Until next time, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.